Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we are going to be doing an oil change on the 2014 4Runner, and this is going to be a how-to video. What you're going to need for the oil change on the 4Runner is 6.6 quarts of OW20 oil. You're going to need an oil filter with some crush washers, and then the 4Runner oil filter requires this little adapter to take the filter off, and an oil pan with a funnel. Today we're going to be using everything Liqui Moly. So we've got our oil and we have our Cera Tec. We're going to add it to the new oil once the oil change is done. This prevents metal to metal contact, which in turn extends the life of your engine.
The next step is to take off all of the bolts and clips underneath to access the oil pan and oil filter.
We forgot an impact, so we're going old school with a socket.
But the bolts are 10 millimeter.
So the bolts we're removing are 10 millimeter bolts. So before we drain the oil, we're going to take the oil cap off, and we're just going to pull the dipstick a couple inches out just so that air can flow through and your oil will drain faster.
Just went ahead and took off these 6 bolts that are holding on this plastic trim piece. And now Adam is working on taking off the 4 other bolts that hold together the metal skid plate behind it. Now that the 4 bolts are out, the back is actually on a hinge and it just falls down. Once you have it on a hinge, it's pretty easy to take off, which Adam is doing right here. And then we can pull that piece out of the way. Now the 4 bolts that I was talking about are here, 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 and here. And then the hinge that I was talking about are these here, and you have to pull down and towards you to get this off. And now underneath the car we have the oil filter here. To find the oil drain pan bolt, it's going to be under this trap door right here. So you'll have to take off 2 bolts right there and right there to get to the drain plug.
Now that we have the tray off, there was 2 12mm bolts. Now we have access to the drain plug. So once the plate is off, you have access to the drain bolt. It's a 14mm, and you're going to want to have your oil pan ready to go. Slowly loosen it with the socket, and once it's pretty tight, then you can take it off by hand and be ready for all your oil.
And while the oil is draining, I'm going to go ahead and clean all the oil off the drain bolt. We just went ahead and took off the old crush washer, and now we have a new one. You should be replacing these every single oil change, regardless of what someone tells you. So we have the new one on, and now this is ready to go. Now that the oil is pretty much almost all drained, Adam's going to put the drain bolt back on, and we are going to move on to the oil filter and then let that drain as well. And then to put the drain plug back on, it's the same thing as coming off, just in reverse. So you'll put the bolt on, and then you'll put on the trap doors on top, and then move to the oil filter.
Okay, so now we have our filter attachment, and we put the drain plug back in and the little trap door back in. So now we're going to go ahead and take the filter out so that we can swap it.
Now that the filter is out, I'm going to work on cleaning this all up and then getting this old filter out and putting the new one in.
So while we're swapping the filter, you're also going to want to swap this rubber gasket as well. And your filter should come with a new one. So we replaced this gasket, and there's also a little rubber one inside here that we also need to replace. With both gaskets changed and the new filter in, we're going to go ahead and fill up the filter with oil.
Now the filter is full and we are going to install it back under the car.
So you don't need to crank this, just get it hand tight and then a few turns with the socket. So now that the filter's back on and tightened, I always go ahead and just clean up, especially right here. As you can see, the oil drips onto the bracket here. So I always clean it all up, because then if you are leaking oil, you'll be able to tell whether it's new or old. And now the fun part, put your filter in and we're gonna dump the oil. Now to pour the oil, 6.6 quarts. Not mandatory, but highly recommended, the Cera Tec. And we've got all of our oil in there, so now I'm going to go ahead, shake this up, then pour it in. So we've got new oil and Cera Tec in. Now simply just put your oil cap back on. So now we're gonna go ahead, start the car for a minute, let the oil run through, and then we'll check the oil, and if it's a little bit low, we'll add a bit more. Let the car run for about a minute. Now I'm just gonna check the oil and make sure that it is full. And that's perfect, right at the second line. So we're good to go. Oil change is complete. We can go ahead and start putting all of the under panels back on.
For this metal tray, the one on hinges, it's just going to be the same thing in reverse. So you're going to get the hinges hooked on first and then the 4 bolts around it. Once you do that, I'm going to move to this front plastic trim piece and put the 6 bolts on there. Now everything underneath is back on. No leaking oil, and our oil change is complete.